Okay, so where we left off is with the kick and bass that we did in the last tutorial, and we just threw in some EQ, nothing else. That's all we're going to concentrate on at the moment, just to get it sitting nicely. Always remember to name. We didn't do that in the last one, so you know what you're doing, and you can use colours, which it does help. I don't tend to use colours because it doesn't help me in that way, but we will colour just for this example. At a later date. So what we're going to do is we're going to load another Nexus, and we're going to load still not updated. We're going to load my favourite patch as always, which is Citron Yellow. We're going to turn the cutoff right down so we've got this effect. Let's just up the thing there. Sounds nice, and then when it filters in, we've got a nice little sound. Right, so the first thing we have to do is remember what we've done, just familiarise ourselves. Minus 6 dB for the headroom, so give the synth the same. Okay, and we'll just throw in a little melody there. So we're working on A. So what could we have there? Right, we'll just do something simple like that. Right, and there we are. We'll just neaten that up. We'll go over stuff like that later. Right, just for the purpose of this exercise, we'll just leave it on there. So we've got a synth in there. Let's just drop that below, and we'll just call it synth 1 for now. Now, to have more control over something, I tend to split the synth up into another 3 parts, for example, which would be like the chords, the main kind of riff of the melody, and then the top melody, which is kind of the last bit I add on, which is nearer to the end of the track. So it'd be split into 3, probably the same synth, same settings. So I work with one synth and then I duplicate it, so I get the same settings, and then you can adjust them from there. So with synth 1, what we'll do is we'll just make this into basic chords. So first things first, just to get it fitting, EQ, pre-EQ, work out where we want it. Right, we'll have it there. Now there's a lot of fundamentals, like a lot of frequencies that are in the way here, so just check them out first. So they are contributing a lot to the sound. You can hear the sound. I have to take one away. And then just mute that for a second. Now you can see what sound I've taken. Now there's another one which is lower, which is this one. Right, we want this very narrow. We'll have that narrower, so keeping some. Probably don't need to go that low. We want some of the characteristics of the sound. So now if we just bypass that. Now that's kind of how you train your ears. I could already hear that, but with the analyzer you get a good idea of where those sounds are that you don't want. Just listen to again. Right, and what we'll do is we'll just boost it a little bit. Just get a bit of top end for now. Right, so that's blended that in nicely. Now, I feel like there's a bit too much bass off that, so just chuck a bit more in there, and then we'll just chuck in to double up the bass a bit. And I think we'll half the size again. Right, so now what you can do, now if we look at the synth sitting quite similar, the only thing that's hitting above this level at the moment is probably the kick. So it's balanced nicely, so what we'll do is, just because it's very flat at the moment, you can do different things. Distortion is a good start, so I'll do an example of distortion, and we'll just pick out saturation basic. Still got wrong one selected. It'll just give it a bit more oomph when it's playing. So what we'll do is we'll shut that down. Now it's starting to work nicely, but the bass seems to be overpowering the synth still. So what we'll do in this one, which what I wasn't going to do, but it makes sense to do it, is we're going to set up a sidechain. Now, normally you have a preset project set up ready for sidechain, then you don't have to do this every time, because it can get quite annoying. Right, so we're just going to pick a random kit which happens to be R&B that is selected from just the basic drum module. And the first things we're going to do is we're going to chuck the volume down to 0. This applies to cubase. It applies to a lot of other, you'd have to work out for your own digital workstation, but this is how you do it on Cubase. And what we're going to do is we'll just cheat. We'll go to the kick here, copy the kick, go down to Groove Agent, and just paste the kick in there. And then we just turn it up. We've got a kick. Now, what we need to do to set up the sidechain is what I tend to do in my workflow is, let's pick the synth. We need to rename these in the mixer as well, so you can recognise them against. So I've picked the synth, which is this, and I tend to, in my workflow, is to pick the bottom insert, compressor, and then turn on sidechain, turn off the analysis, turn off auto, and I just chuck it up to about 22, 23, something like that. Leave the release, everything like that for now, and then you can turn that off. And then what we do is, I'm trying to work out, for now we'll go in here. You need to find the sends, and then you've got a Sidechain Compressor for Nexus 4 instrument 8. We click that, we turn it on, then we'll turn it up to 0 or near 0 for now. Right, okay, so it's there. Now you can tell it's not doing anything, which is why you need to turn on pre-fader. Right, so now you've got basic ducking, and if we put that in with a kick, turn the sidechain off. Right, so it is a little bit too powerful, in my opinion, for the demo. So what we'll do is we'll just lower the threshold a little bit. Right, we'll put it about 21. Okay, so with that in mind, you can copy the compressor to all the relevant tracks, and you tweak them for those tracks. You don't just leave them as they are. You've got to make sure it fits. So what we'll do again, and then we have all the other side chains in a separate drop down list, which then we turn them all on. We'll put them all to 0 for now. Put the pre-fader on. Everything on. We'll play it without the sidechain for now. We've got that. And then we'll put the sidechain on. There's an element of control, and then that's what I said in the previous video, that the kick will now cut through a lot easier, which then amplifies it in the track. If you look at the mixer now, the levels have been reduced a lot more compared to the kick. If we turn it off, the back up. If we mute it, we'll do it in here. There's the levels going up, and then the levels drop. Because effectively it is compressing, but just when it's triggered. So it's a bit too much for everything, so we'll just balance it. So I'll just do that quickly now. We want the high mids to come through better, which is this one. So what we can do, you can either reduce it there, or you can go in here and reduce the input level. Okay. And then there, it's more overall balanced there. So what we'll do is just call that sidechain kick. Get these wires out of my way. And then in the mixer, I tend to minimize that. So you know that's a sidechain. So if you need to get to it quick, you know that out of all the mixer, you know, oh, it's that channel which is minimized. Okay, so there's the synth. And just quickly, what we'll do is we'll go into Nexus again, load another one, and we'll load a pad. Let's lower layer pad. Let's saw pad 6. Right, we'll use this one for now. Not particularly keen on it. So practice -6 dB, and what we'll do that is we'll just call it synth pad for now. And what we'll do, quickest way is just to copy those first few notes, open up, paste, and then just lengthen them. And then what we'll do, another quick way so you don't have to stretch them out anymore, is time stretch them. So you can time stretch the longer notes to fit into a longer bar because you're not working in samples there. And then we can just copy them across. And that way we've got a longer thing without it repeating the notes. So the same applies. We'll copy this over just to start with, and then before we forget, we'll drop it into the sidechain. It's always the next one. Next one is always at the bottom of the list. Chuck that up. We'll chuck it up to near 0 dB. Right, so first we'll get the EQ. Just roll the bass off even before we look at it. Right, there seems a bit too much bass in there still for me, so just drag it up. About there. And then what we want to do is we just want to boost it in some key areas to keep it bright. We'll do the classic smile just around here. Okay, so we've got rid of some frequencies we don't want. And then what we can do is we can hear that with the sidechain. Now it's very nice and subtle, that. But we're going to have a nice... I'll have it a bit more violent on this one. And then... So the sidechaining is quite subtle in the track because everything is kind of masking what is really going on, and it just helps the pad sit without kind of taking over the track. And just to get it sitting outside of the melody, because these notes are repeated from the melody, they're on exactly the same octaves and stuff. What we'll do is just take that A and put it up here. And we'll leave the E there for now, and leave the A there. Okay, so we've got a nice... So you can see it's quite a lot lower than the others because of the sidechain being a bit more present. We'll go through about how to boost that up later. So we'll leave it there. We've covered the synth pad, the synth and the sidechain. Just remember when you're sidechaining is to not have everything set at 0 or all at the same preset. You've got to tweak each one to make sure you've got the right elements coming through for the track. If you just compress it all like that, you're just going to get a really blocky sounding track. Everything's going to be doing the same thing at the same time, ducking. And it's not something you want doing. You want everything at its different levels, just like you do on a mixer. We're just keeping the levels straight here for now to avoid any clipping, just to keep it under the 0 dB mark, so we avoid clipping and get distortion that we don't want. So always remember, don't set them all the same. They've all got different settings, even if they're very slight. Yeah, so they're all the same setting there, but if you look in here, you can see I've balanced it out here. So either way is good. You can just lower the threshold and that'll work, but it's entirely up to you. It's your workflow. And that is how to do the synth. I will be back with the next one on how to develop a melody. We'll kind of go off what we've got here in the synth section and we'll build up a melody. I'll see you next time.